Are you suffering because of a ghost? Most of us are chasing a version of ourselves that no longer exists, clinging to rigid blueprints that only create friction and pain. What if the life you've been desperately planning is actually the one thing blocking you from seeing the incredible reality waiting for you right now? Are you suffering because of a ghost? Not a ghost from another realm, but a phantom future, a life you meticulously planned, imagined, and perhaps spent years believing you were supposed to have. It's a peculiar kind of haunting, isn't it? We carry invisible versions of ourselves everywhere we go. The person we thought we'd become by now. The career we were certain we'd have. The relationship we believed would unfold a particular way. The home, family, financial security, or lifestyle we quietly promised ourselves. These versions may not exist anywhere outside our minds, yet they can have an extraordinary amount of power over how we experience the life that actually exists. They become deeply ingrained narratives, blueprints etched into our consciousness that quietly tell us what our lives should look like, who we should be, and where we should have arrived by now. And then reality happens. Think about how often you compare your present circumstances with a vision you created years ago. Maybe you imagined yourself having a particular job title by a certain age. Perhaps you thought you'd be financially secure by now, living in a certain city, married to a particular kind of person, or raising the family you always imagined. And when reality takes a different direction, disappointment can feel almost inevitable. You may begin to wonder, what went wrong? Why am I not where I thought I would be? Why doesn't my life look the way I imagined it would? Sometimes, this creates a painful sense of failure. Sometimes, it becomes regret. And sometimes, it simply leaves us with a quiet emptiness, a feeling that something is missing, even when there may be many beautiful things already present in our lives. But what if the problem isn't necessarily the life you're living? What if the suffering comes from constantly comparing that life to the ghost of the life you thought you were supposed to have? This attachment to a predetermined outcome, to a fixed idea of how things should unfold, is one of the fundamental sources of suffering that Buddhist wisdom has illuminated for centuries. We become so focused on the destination we planned that we stop noticing the road we're actually walking. We overlook the beauty, the lessons, the unexpected relationships, and the opportunities appearing directly in front of us because they don't resemble the picture we originally created. And this invisible weight doesn't remain only in our thoughts. It can show up as stress, anxiety, regret, frustration, and the persistent feeling that we're somehow falling behind. We aren't necessarily suffering because we haven't lived. We're suffering because we keep mourning the life we haven't lived, the life that existed in our imagination. The high cost of a rigid blueprint. This brings us to the high cost of rigid blueprints. We spend enormous amounts of energy constructing detailed maps for our future. We decide where we should be, when we should arrive, what success should look like, and sometimes even how other people and circumstances should behave along the way. But the more rigid that blueprint becomes, the less room we leave for life itself. A rigid blueprint resists change. It demands that reality conform to its lines and expectations instead of allowing us to adapt to the unpredictable currents of existence. But life does not follow our plans simply because we have carefully made them. A career can suddenly change. A relationship can end or take an unexpected direction. Our priorities can shift. Our interests can evolve. Circumstances we never anticipated can completely alter the path ahead. And when one of these things happens, the pain often comes from more than the event itself. It comes from the collision between what we expected reality to be and what reality actually is. We aren't only dealing with what happened, we're also fighting against the fact that it wasn't supposed to happen. Buddhist teachings emphasize the concept of anicca, or impermanence. Everything is constantly changing. Nothing remains exactly as it was. Our circumstances change, other people change, our bodies change, our desires change, and perhaps, most importantly, we change. To cling tightly to a fixed idea of how life must unfold is therefore to resist the very nature of existence. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. The cost of these rigid blueprints can be enormous. We miss opportunities because they don't fit the plan. We exhaust ourselves trying to force circumstances into shapes they were never meant to take. And we can become deeply dissatisfied with a life that may actually contain goodness, simply because it isn't the exact life we once drew on paper. We become so focused on achieving the happiness we planned for that we fail to recognize the happiness that is already here. We sacrifice the richness of the present moment for the promise of a perfect future, a future that may never arrive in the form we imagined. This doesn't mean that planning is wrong. Goals can be valuable. Intentions can give us direction. Having a vision for the future can help us make meaningful choices. The problem begins when our plans stop being guides and start becoming demands. When a goal becomes an absolute requirement for happiness, we place our peace at the mercy of circumstances we cannot fully control. And when our identity becomes tied to whether those specific plans succeed or fail, our sense of self becomes fragile. A change in circumstances can suddenly feel like a judgment on who we are. So how do we begin dismantling the structure of yesterday? The first step is awareness. We have to consciously recognize these ghost versions of ourselves and these rigid blueprints for what they truly are. Mental constructs, not immutable truths. They are ideas we created. They are not promises that life was required to keep. This isn't about abandoning every aspiration or becoming aimless. It's about loosening our grip on specific outcomes and rigid timelines. It's about recognizing that the plans we made in the past were created by a past version of ourselves. That person had different experiences, different information, different fears, different desires. They made the best plans they could with the understanding they had at the time. But you are not that exact person anymore. The person you are today has lived through things your past self could never have predicted. You've learned, you've changed, your perspective has expanded, and perhaps what once seemed essential to your happiness no longer carries the same meaning. Maybe the life you're being called toward now looks completely different from the life you once planned. And perhaps the first step isn't figuring out how to force yourself back onto the old path. Perhaps it's simply becoming willing to see what is actually here. One powerful practice from Buddhist wisdom that can help us loosen our attachment to these old blueprints is non-identification. We are not our plans. We are not our past failures or our past successes. We are not the roles we play, the titles we hold, or the expectations others have placed upon us. There is a part of us that can observe all of these things without being defined by them. When we create even a little space between who we are and what we once planned, we begin to loosen the emotional scaffolding that keeps these ghost versions alive. And this can begin with a simple, honest inquiry. Is this plan still serving me now? Is this vision still aligned with who I am today? These questions may sound simple, but answering them honestly can require tremendous courage. Because sometimes a path we once pursued passionately is no longer the path we want. Sometimes a dream we once held tightly has naturally changed. And sometimes we discover that what we were chasing wasn't entirely our own dream in the first place. Perhaps we wanted to prove something to our family. Perhaps we wanted recognition from others. Perhaps we wanted to show an old version of ourselves that we could succeed. Or perhaps we simply believed that reaching a particular destination would finally make us feel worthy, secure, or complete. Letting go of these expectations means releasing the need to constantly prove something to other people, to society, or even to the person we used to be. And this dismantling is not destructive, it is liberating. Imagine walking into an attic that you've avoided for years. It's filled with old furniture, forgotten possessions, and things you once thought you would need but haven't touched in a very long time. You don't have to hate those things to let them go. You can simply recognize that they belonged to another chapter. Clearing the space doesn't erase your history. It gives you room to live differently now. In the same way, releasing outdated expectations doesn't mean rejecting who you were. It means making room for who you are becoming. And once we begin dismantling the structures that no longer serve us, we can take the next step, learning the art of surrendering to the current flow of life. Surrender does not mean giving up. It doesn't mean becoming passive, abandoning your goals, or allowing life to happen without your participation. True surrender is much more active than that. It means engaging fully with what is, rather than constantly fighting for what you believe should be. It is a profound act of trust. Trust in the unfolding of life. Trust in your ability to adapt. Trust in your own resilience. And trust that there is wisdom available in paying attention to the present moment instead of trying to control every possible outcome. Surrender means loosening the need to make everything happen according to a predetermined script. Instead of asking, "How do I force this situation to become what I wanted?" we begin asking, "What is this moment asking of me? What can I learn from what is happening? What possibility exists here that I couldn't see before?" This is where mindfulness becomes so important. Mindfulness is the practice of returning our attention to what is actually happening now. We observe our thoughts, emotions, and sensations without immediately judging them or allowing them to control us. So when we notice ourselves clinging to an old plan, we don't need to criticize ourselves. We simply notice. When disappointment appears because reality doesn't match our expectations, we notice that too. We breathe. We allow the feeling to be present without turning it into a story about our worth or our future. And then, gently, we release our grip. This practice teaches us to respond to life as it unfolds, rather than reacting from fear, disappointment, or attachment to a predetermined script. And something begins to change. We become more adaptable, more peaceful, more capable of meeting uncertainty without immediately seeing it as a threat. When we surrender in this way, we become a little like a reed in the wind. It bends without losing its roots. It responds to the movement around it, instead of demanding that the wind stop blowing. And this flexibility creates a different kind of strength. We become more resilient because we no longer require life to remain predictable in order to feel okay. We become more creative because we are able to see possibilities outside the boundaries of our old plans. And we become more open to unexpected forms of joy. Surrender allows us to discover freedom in the present moment, because this moment, right now, is the only moment we truly have. Life is not happening in the imagined past, and it isn't happening in the projected future. It is happening here, right now. This is where the people we love are. This is where our choices exist. This is where our experiences are unfolding. This is where life can actually be lived. Surrender, then, isn't an escape from reality. It is a deeper engagement with reality. It is a willingness to dance with the present, to bring our full attention and intention to whatever arises without constantly comparing it to the ghost of what we thought should have been. And this brings us to perhaps the most empowering step of all: inhabiting your vibrant reality now. This is where everything we've explored begins to come together. When we loosen our grip on past plans and future expectations, we create space for something incredibly valuable: genuine presence. Inhabiting your vibrant reality means fully engaging with the life you actually have, not the life you once planned. It means noticing the small moments that are easy to overlook: the quiet morning, a meaningful conversation, a meal shared with someone you care about, a walk outside, a moment of laughter, the simple feeling of being alive. These moments may seem ordinary, but they are not separate from life. They are life. Buddhist wisdom encourages us to cultivate metta, or loving kindness, toward ourselves and others. And when we stop constantly judging our present circumstances against an idealized vision of the past, we can begin approaching our lives with more compassion and curiosity. Instead of asking, "Why isn't my life what I wanted it to be?" we can begin asking, "What beauty can I find here? What can this moment teach me? What can I appreciate? How can I contribute to what is happening right now?" That small shift in perspective can transform the way we experience our lives. Instead of feeling as though fulfillment is always somewhere ahead of us, we begin to recognize that moments of fulfillment are already available. Not because everything is perfect, not because every problem has disappeared, but because we have stopped requiring perfection before allowing ourselves to be present. Your current life may not resemble the life you once imagined. There may still be imperfections. There may be detours you never expected. There may be chapters you would never have chosen for yourself. But they are still part of your journey. And when you stop treating those unexpected turns as evidence that your life has gone wrong, you become more capable of discovering what they have to offer. You stop waiting for life to begin. You stop telling yourself, "I'll finally be happy when I get the job, when I find the relationship, when I reach the goal, when everything finally falls into place." Instead, you begin living where life has always been available to you. Here, you discover that the life waiting for you isn't necessarily some distant future version of existence. It may be the very life you're already living, waiting for you to fully show up for it. This is where genuine purpose and meaning can begin to emerge. Not through rigidly following a blueprint created years ago, but through courageous and compassionate engagement with the life that continues to unfold. It is a life lived with open hands rather than clenched fists, with an open heart rather than a list of demands. You still make choices. You still have dreams. You still move forward, but you no longer require life to follow one narrow path in order for it to be meaningful. You allow yourself to receive what comes. You meet what comes. And then you decide how you will respond. So let's pause and look back at this journey. We began by recognizing the invisible weight of our ghost versions, the past plans, imagined futures, and idealized versions of ourselves that can quietly haunt the present. We explored the high cost of rigid blueprints and how clinging to fixed expectations can prevent us from adapting to reality and appreciating what is already here. Then we looked at the importance of dismantling the structure of yesterday, recognizing outdated plans for what they are, and loosening our grip on expectations that no longer serve who we are today. From there, we moved into the art of surrendering to the current flow, not giving up, but learning to meet impermanence with mindfulness, trust, and flexibility. And finally, we arrived here, inhabiting your vibrant reality now, fully engaging with the life you have, seeing it with compassion, experiencing it with presence, and allowing yourself to find meaning without constantly comparing today to the ghost of yesterday. None of this means abandoning ambition. It doesn't mean giving up your dreams or refusing to plan for the future. It means holding your dreams lightly enough that they can evolve. It means allowing your goals to change as you change. And, most importantly, it means understanding that your peace cannot depend entirely on whether life follows the blueprint you created for it. True fulfillment comes from engaging with the life that is actually unfolding, not endlessly chasing a phantom version of the life you once imagined. When we learn to find peace and purpose in the present, something beautiful happens. We don't necessarily lose our future. We become more capable of creating one that is authentic to who we are now. So perhaps the question isn't, how do I get back to the life I planned? Perhaps the deeper question is, now that I am here, what life is asking to be lived? And maybe the life waiting for you has been here all along. Not perfect, not predictable, not exactly what you imagined, but real, and waiting for you to finally stop chasing the ghost long enough to see it. Thank you for joining me on this reflection. If this message resonated with you, consider subscribing to Mindful Reflections for more explorations of Buddhist wisdom, mindfulness, and the journey toward a more peaceful life. And if you know someone who may be struggling to let go of the life they once imagined, share this video with them. Sometimes, the life we are waiting for begins when we finally stop demanding that life look the way we planned.